All right. My first question is, what other press encounters do we have today? The answer is at 1:45 in this very room. There'll be a briefing by Ambassador Harold Ajiman, permanent representative of Ghana to the United Nations, and chair of the third session of the preparatory committee for the 2026 review conference of the parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. At 5:30 p.m. at the Security Council Stakeout, you will enjoy a press encounter with Jean-Noël Barrot, the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Raphael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. They will be briefing you after the Security Council's private meeting. This morning, you heard the... Thank you. This morning, the Secretary General, as you heard, spoke at ECOSOC on the financing for development. He said, as we prepare for the fourth international conference on development in Sevilla in July, we're facing some harsh truths. Donors are pulling out, pulling the plug on aid commitments. Sustainable development goals are dramatically off track, and high borrowing costs are draining away public investments. But the more dangerous truth is that collaboration is being questioned with the ongoing trade wars. The Secretary General said trade is a prime example of the benefits of international cooperation, and trade barriers are a clear and present danger to global economy and sustainable development. These are tough times, he said, but it is in difficult periods that the imperative for responsible and sustainable investment is even more critical. Our Deputy Secretary General is in Montevideo, Uruguay today. She met with the President of Uruguay, Yamandu Orsi, to discuss the country's development priorities and their alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. Later today, she will meet with several government ministers to discuss the partnership between the United Nations and Uruguay. She's also meeting with youth groups, civil society, and of course, the country team of the United Nations. And over the weekend, she chaired the annual regional retreat with UN resident coordinators from across Latin America and the Caribbean. Ms. Mohammed will leave Uruguay later today and will be back here tomorrow evening. This morning, our friends at the Office for Counterterrorism launched the Victims of Terrorism Associations Network. This is an initiative that brings together victims of terrorism and victims associations from across the globe to drive collective action to support victims' rights and needs. The network aims to provide a safe space for victims and survivors of terrorism to support each other, build resilience, and engage as advocates, as educators, and as peace builders. The development of the network was supported by financial contribution from Spain. The network was launched during an event this morning, is already available on UN Web TV. More information on the website of the Office for Counterterrorism. And also today I want to flag that the annual report for Trust Fund in support of victims of sexual and exploitation and abuse was published. The Trust Fund is managed by the Secretariat, by the Department of Management, and it helps fund gaps in assistance to victims and children born of sexual exploitation and abuse by UN personnel in peace operations, as well as humanitarian development settings. The report details the psychological, medical, and legal support provided in the past year to over 4,300 community members, including children fathered by UN peacekeepers, and helped with income-generating activities. The Trust Fund is also raising awareness on the risk of misconduct among up to 89,000 community members living in the vicinity of UN premises in the Central African Republic, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Haiti, Liberia, Guatemala, and South Sudan. Since its establishment in 2016, the Trust Fund has received over $5 million, including voluntary contributions from 25 member states and payments withheld following substantiated allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse by UN personnel. We continue to appeal to member states for additional funding for this important work. Also want to flag that this morning at the International Court of Justice, our legal counsel, Eleanor Hammarskjöld, presented to the International Court the key legal points of the UN's written statement on the relevant obligations of Israel as a member state of the United Nations and as an occupying power. The UN's written statement was submitted on February 27th of this year. The legal counsel made clear that all parties to a conflict, not just Israel, must comply with all their obligations under international law, including international human rights law and international humanitarian law at all times. Israel has an obligation to agree to and facilitate relief schemes in the occupied Palestinian territory, including those of the United Nations. Humanitarian, medical, and UN personnel must be respected and they must be protected. The importance of these proceedings goes well beyond the present situation. The court will be called to address certain crucial issues related to the protection of the work of the UN on the ground, not just in the occupied Palestinian territory, but elsewhere in the world. And turning to the situation on the ground in Gaza, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that ongoing Israeli attacks have reportedly killed or injured scores of Palestinians in recent days and damaged civilian infrastructure. And as the legal counsel just told the International Court of Justice, we stress once again that under international humanitarian law, civilians, including aid workers, must be protected. Humanitarian operations continue to be severely constrained due to the ongoing military operations, as well as the blocking of aid and commercial goods. That blocking became total more than 8 weeks ago. As stocks dwindle, partners are doing everything possible to reach people with what supplies are still available. Our partners tell us that over the weekend, 16 additional community kitchens had to close, despite their efforts to adjust menu, reduce portions, and mobilize support from the community. More kitchens are expected to close this week as they run out of supplies. People in Gaza rely on these meals as their only consistent source of food assistance. As you'll recall, last week, WFP announced the depletion of its stocks, warning that it would force kitchens to close within days. And again, as Ms. Hammarskjöld told the court in The Hague, Israel, as the occupying power, has clear obligations under international law, which includes ensuring food, medical supplies, and public services are available and facilitating humanitarian relief when those are not otherwise supplied. Meanwhile, there's been an increase in reports of looting incidents amidst the desperate humanitarian situation and lack of commodities. Over the weekend, armed individuals reportedly looted a truck in Deir al-Balah and a warehouse in Gaza City. As more than 2 million people face severe food shortages, the UN and our partners say the latest famine review analysis of the integrated food security phase classification started this week. Across Gaza, our humanitarian partners are warning that the nutritional situation is worsening. Since the start of the year, about 10,000 cases of acute malnutrition among children have been identified, including 1,600 cases of severe acute malnutrition. Although treatment supplies remain available in southern Gaza, operational and security restrictions make effort to access them extremely difficult, to say the least. Meanwhile, thousands more families are estimated to have fled in response to another displacement issued by the Israeli forces on Friday for western areas of Gaza Governorate. Our partners are supporting water, sanitation, and hygiene services tell us that while they continue to provide water through more than a dozen distribution points, there's been a 20% reduction in water production over the past 3 weeks due to fuel being inaccessible or located in hard-to-reach areas, which is obviously impacting the ability to extract water from wells. OCHA reminds us that the depletion of critical stocks in Gaza goes far beyond food. One example is a trauma-related medical supply which are running out at a time when the number of people injured in mass casualty incidents continue to increase. There's a lack of surgical supplies. Our friends at the World Health Organizations tell us that their warehouse has run out of therapeutic milk, intravenous antibiotics, and painkillers, as well as spare parts for ambulance and oxygen stations. Further, on the health response, our partners also warn that an increased number of critical staff are being denied access to Gaza. They've seen a rise in denial of entry for emergency medical teams, particularly highly specialized professionals, including orthopedic and plastic surgeons, and a recent restriction of movement across Gaza. On the education front, last week's displacement order affected learning for more than 2,500 students and dozens of teachers. The directives are also hindered access to urgently needed mental health support and recreational activities for children. Since the end of the ceasefire, more than 90,000 students and 2,000 teachers have been impacted by displacement orders. Moving north to Lebanon, we note with concern the continued Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, including the one in southern Beirut yesterday. Once again, we urge all parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from activities that endanger civilians and jeopardize the cessation of hostilities. I can tell you that the Office of the Special Coordinator for Lebanon continues to engage with all stakeholders to de-escalate and prevent tensions. Again, we reiterate the importance for everyone to fulfill its obligation under Security Council Resolution 1701. And moving to Yemen, I can tell you that we are deeply alarmed by reports of an airstrike hitting a detention center holding migrants in the Sada governorate, and that took place reportedly overnight. And we're saddened by the tragic loss of life, where many of these migrants are believed to have been killed and injured. According to preliminary information, 68 migrants were killed and another 48 injured. These numbers could increase as search and rescue efforts continue, which are being led by frontline responders. While our colleagues at the International Organization for Migration has not been operating at this particular facility, they remain committed to closely monitoring the situation, stand ready to afford support if needed. Furthermore, our humanitarian colleagues say that there are reports that hospitals in the area are being overwhelmed due to their limited capacity. 2 nearby hospitals have already received more than 50 injured people, many of them critically wounded. These strikes pose a growing risk to the civilian population in Yemen. We've also received reports of 8 people killed and another 6 injured, including women and children, in Bani al-Harith district in Sana'a governorate on Sunday. We continue to call on parties to uphold their obligations under international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians. Moving across the Red Sea to Sudan, where the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate, and I can tell you that we are also gravely concerned about the plight of civilians fleeing Zamzam camp, as well as dire situation in and around El Fasher, which is in North Darfur. As you're aware, famine conditions have been identified in Zamzam and other displacement camps in the areas, and key humanitarian partners have been forced to suspend operations due to severe insecurity during the last wave of violent attacks. We continue to receive alarming reports of serious protection issues such as arbitrary arrests, harassment, intimidation at checkpoints controlled by the Rapid Support Forces. In El Fasher itself, it remains under siege with ongoing shelling of civilians. Today, local sources in El Fasher are reporting further intensification of attacks in the area. Although information on civilian casualties is not yet available, we reiterate that international humanitarian law must be respected. All parties must ensure facilitate safe, unhindered, and sustained humanitarian access, including to El Fasher itself. Civilians, including humanitarian workers, must be protected, and safe passage must be ensured. Meanwhile, the authorities in Sudan's North State are reporting the arrival of thousands of people from Zamzam camp in Al-Mala town in North Darfur and from Omdurman in Khartoum. The majority of these displaced people are seeking safety in poorly constructed shelters, while others are being hosted by families or friends. They're relying on just one meal a day and in dire need of food, in dire need of sanitation, water, nutrition, shelter, and every other possible support. Moving to Afghanistan, Tom Fletcher, our Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, is currently there. Yesterday, he met with the de facto Foreign Minister, Amir Khan Muttaqi, in Kabul. They discuss how climate change is deepening the humanitarian challenges facing the country, as well as progress made in tackling insecurity and drugs. Mr. Fletcher, of course, stressed the plight of Afghan women and that it remains a top priority, underscoring that development is impossible without girls' education and their full participation. Our humanitarian colleagues note that across Afghanistan, some 23 million people, more than half of the population in the country, need life-saving assistance at a time where we and our partners are grappling with deep funding cuts, as you've been hearing from Ambassador Ray and Filippo Grandi. In a social media post, Mr. Fletcher stressed we remain determined to deliver for the Afghan people. Today, he met with humanitarians who deliver critical aid in the country. He also met with the de facto Minister of the Economy, Din Mohammed Hanif, and the de facto Deputy Prime Minister for Administrative Affairs, Abdul Salam Hanafi. They discussed the impact of funding cuts on aid programs, the need to reduce bureaucratic restrictions, and the crucial role of women in the humanitarian response and ongoing arrival of returnees, from Pakistan into Afghanistan. Staying in Asia and turning to Myanmar, our humanitarian colleagues say that 1 month after the devastating earthquake, more than 6 million people need urgent assistance in the most impacted areas. In some places, many people remain too afraid to go back to their homes, worried they could collapse at any moment with the ongoing aftershocks. At least 55,000 homes were damaged or destroyed, and countless people continue to live in the open, sometimes in makeshift tents, exposed obviously to harsh weather. We and our partners continue to deliver life-saving assistance. Since the earthquake, at least 600,000 people have been reached with safe water, with sanitation and hygiene support. 500,000 people received food assistance, and more than 115,000 people received shelter and other critical support. This is a critical moment for the response. Additional and quick disbursement of resources and sustained access to all communities are vital to ensure that the situation does not deteriorate further. We encourage donors to give generously to that humanitarian appeal and all others. This morning you heard from Filippo Grandi, who briefed the Council. He said from Ukraine to Sudan, from Sahel to Myanmar, from the DRC to Haiti, violence has become the defining currency of our age. He said that according to the International Committee of the Red Cross, 120 conflicts rage unabated. His full remarks were shared with you. Today is important for all of us. It's World Day for Safety and Health at Work. This is a safe space. A new report by the International Labour Organization highlights how emerging technologies help improve efficiency and well-being, such as robots assisting in surgeries, while at the same time underscoring the need to ensure these technologies are implemented safely and equitably. Two more quick mentions. We have a new resident coordinator in Samoa. The Secretary General appointed Carla Hershey of the U.S. as a new resident coordinator for Samoa. With the host government approval. She started April 26, 2 days ago. She also coordinates development operations in the Cook Islands, Niue and Tuvalu. She brings more than 30 years of experience, and we congratulate her. No time for a quiz, so we'll just say thank you to our friends in the Dominican Republic and in Rwanda. 97 people paid up. Gabriel and then Farnoosh.
Thank you, Steph. We've heard from you over the last several weeks and months about the Secretary General trying to deal with budget cuts, fiscal responsibility. I guess my question is, we just heard from Filippo Grandi about 1/3 cuts at UNHCR, losing potentially $2 billion a year from the United States in funding. We just heard from World Food Program is also doing cuts as well. My question is, what is the overarching strategy by the Secretary General to deal with these cuts that are now no longer just a theoretical exercise, but a reality?
There are different kinds of cuts. The most violent that we have seen really hit our humanitarian and development partners because the cuts are immediate. The way they're funded are through voluntary contribution. The money is allotted for specific programs, and the money is not there. The work's not getting done. And I think Filippo was much more eloquent than I could ever be on the real-life impact, and I think Ambassador Ray was as well. For the Secretariat and peacekeeping, it's a different issue because it's assessed contribution, so it's a slightly more predictable. So I think the Secretary General has said that we're facing a liquidity crisis. We're managing that. We're obviously, and as he always has been, is looking to be the most possibly responsible caretaker of the money that is entrusted to us. The strategy is also to ensure that member states understand the quick and real impact of these cuts. And again, I mean, I'll refer you back to what both Filippo and Ambassador Ray said, and that's, insecurity in one part of the world is bad for security in every part of the world. When countries that need assistance are not getting it, it'll have an impact on those countries that are traditionally the donors. Nothing stops at borders. Farnoosh, and then.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. I'm wondering if the Secretary General can, or you can confirm or have comment about the World Food Program plans to cut 25 to 30%.
I urge you to ask the World Food Program. They should speak to it. Okay. I can't confirm it.
Okay.
Because I haven't spoken to them this morning. Vladimir and then Lenka.
Thank you, Stéphane. I've got a couple of questions on the Russian war against Ukraine. I hope you won't be accused of participating in the Russophobic front this time. Russian ruler Putin claims he has again announced a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine. The Trump administration has already criticized this statement, saying that the truce should be permanent. What is your position on this?
We've taken note of the various statements. Our position remains the same, that we want to see an end to the war. But we need to see an end to the war that remains principled and consistent and firmly grounded in the UN Charter, in international law, in line with all the relevant resolutions. It needs to be sustainable and recognize the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine.
The second question. Both Russia and North Korea have acknowledged that North Korean troops are involved in Russia's war against Ukraine. What is your reaction to this?
I think the internationalization of any conflict is not a move in the right direction. Lenka.
On 100 days or 99 days of President Trump in the office, Russian president has already called twice for ceasefire in Ukraine. How does the UN see his 100 days in the office? Has we moved closer to a ceasefire with President Trump's efforts?
So
Thank you.
It is, I'm not an analyst. I'm barely a spokesperson. I will leave all of that to all of you who are smarter, who study these things. Where I'm here to talk about the UN. I will let others provide an analysis. We're just dealing with the, we deal with things as they come, with the decisions taken by member states and the impact that they have as they come.
But you appreciate the United States' efforts to mediate the conflict?
We appreciate any and all effort that will lead to an end to this conflict in line with our position, which has been stated many, 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 many times. Sinan, and then Michelle.
Oh, thank you, Steph. I have a couple of questions actually on Syria. First thing is there's a new discussion in Syria. Basically, the Kurdish administration asked for a federal system in Syria. As you know, they're building a new country there. But the transitional government has been ignoring this request. I wonder what Secretary General's reactions to the Kurdish demands and also for the transitional government, like ignoring this demand.
Look, it is important that all voices in Syria be heard as the transitional authorities transition to a new Syria, to a new political system, that all religious groups, all nationalities and ethnicities feel represented and feel safe in Syria. And I think that is our message to the Syrian authorities. I think Mr. Pedersen explained pretty clearly and publicly and does so in private. This afternoon, the Secretary General will meet the foreign minister, the interim foreign minister from Syria, and then we'll issue a readout from that as well.
Quick follow-up, but do you think Secretary General thinks there could be an option for future of Syria?
The Secretary General is not a Syrian politician. It's not for him to decide. We've put forward our position, which is one of inclusivity, right, and accountability. But the details is up to the Syrian people.
Last one. I know you always say this, and Mr. Secretary General always says Syrian will decide for their future. Yes, but I'm sure he has a perspective, or I'm sure he has a perspective about that kind of things. What will be his comment about that kind of perspective, since he's the Secretary General of United Nations?
His perspective.
His perspective is like about the federation, like the federal systems.
So again, Mr. Guterres was in his youth was very active in his country's transition from dictatorship to democracy, and I think for him it is important that all voices be heard. Michelle, then Stefano.
Thanks, Steph. Just on Gaza, is there any kind of update on, the negotiations that were going on between the UN and Israel on trying to get more aid in, and the SG was very vocal about dismissing the sort of plan that Israel had put forward. Are those talks still ongoing?
Contacts are continuing. As for their outcome, I think my pretty grim report will answer your question as to where we are.
And then you mentioned on Friday some of the looting and described it as opportunistic, but then today you mentioned there was like armed men who went after it. Like, is it still just sort of people looting out of desperation, or is it a little more organised?
Listen, when one faces looters, one doesn't ask that many questions. When one faces the barrel of a gun. What we can tell you is that during that interim period where there was a ceasefire, when aid was coming in, we received no reports of looting. Whether people who are stealing aid are doing it out of desperation, whether it's criminal gangs or other groups doing it to steal and then sell, I don't know. But what we do know is that there's less and less material commodities in Gaza.
Then just, sorry, one last one. You said, I know you mentioned the IPC are starting their next analysis, but what are UN staff and aid workers seeing on the ground? Like, what kind of signs of hunger?
They're seeing people not have access to food. They're seeing people not having access to water. No more fresh fruit. No more meat. Barely a meal a day in many cases. What they're seeing is desperation. What they're seeing is people going hungry. I will leave it to our colleagues who deal with this on a more scientific basis to report back. Vacara.
Grazie. Israeli Foreign Minister Sahar publicly accused Secretary General Guterres and UNRWA's leadership showing the banner J'accuse in Jerusalem and attacked the ICJ proceeding in The Hague, calling it a circus. Does the Secretary General have a response?
I don't think the Secretary General is a big fan of a circus. We take these things very seriously. I think the legal counsel's presentation to the International Court of Justice is extremely detailed and very clear and very legal. We saw the comments coming out of the Foreign Ministry, and I can tell you that if you go back and look in the record, not that long ago, it was the United Nations that first revealed the Israeli allegations against UNRWA. The Secretary General was very clear, straightforward. In January of 2024, Mr. Lazzarini took extremely quick action. We have always acted when information is shared with us. It is all too often, unfortunately, shared via the media, instead shared with us directly.
A quick follow-up. Does the Secretary General suspect that the reason that after 100 days he didn't meet in person yet the President of the United States could be because those tense relationship with the Israeli government?
I will let you speculate, sir.
Thanks so much, Steph. Did the blackout in Spain and Portugal affect UN operations in the regions?
You know, it's a very good question. I was going to check because we do have a logistics base in Valencia, but I believe they have a lot of good backup generators. So beyond obviously the offices of the World Tourism Organization in Madrid, but I will check on the Valencia base. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. Apropos of UNRWA, what is the status in terms of various allegations that have been made about UNRWA staff? Has everything been resolved according to the UN?
We continue to look at all the allegations that have been taken, and as you recall, a few months ago we were public in the actions that had been taken. Okay, any questions online? No mics, no mas. Thank you.